The enterprise networking group consists of the Catalyst switching business, the ISR access routing business, the ASR1K head-end routers, the Wi-Fi business, as well as some of the L4 to 7 services that run across that, like WAN acceleration. So that's a $21.6 billion business. I partner with Chris Young, who provides the security capability. And then David Yen focuses on the data center. And the three of us together are really all of the Cisco core networking business. And of course we have the SP networking in addition to the collaboration and video businesses.
What's your relationship now with UCS? And I know, a Nexus will plug into UCS, et cetera. And how does that work?
Well, so you can think of the big trend in the data center, trends around converged infrastructure, UCS, our Nexus stack, what's happening with SDN and data center. What I focus on isn't building the data center. I focus on getting those applications connected out to the users.
Got it.
So getting the users onto the network, getting applications delivered out to those users with a high level of application experience, as well as increasingly now getting things and new kinds of infrastructure onto the network. That's really the mission of the enterprise networking team.
Now, for better or for worse, and people have been saying this for years, the switch business is being commoditized, Cisco's losing share, though you don't. How do you see the growth of the switching market and then that shift, I guess, for you guys from Catalyst to Nexus on some of the platforms and how that's helping you to grow or not?
Well, it's sort of two different things going on. Out in the distributed enterprise piece, it's just about bringing people onto the network, whether they're wired or wireless, whether they're in the corporate campus or out in the branch or coming over VPN. So we're focusing on solving that problem, whether we solve it with a switch or a Wi-Fi device or a router or a VPN concentrator, it really doesn't matter. And that's a big business for us and a business where we're holding share very well, thank you very much.
Good.
In the data center, we did a specific transition from Catalyst to Nexus, and that's pretty much over. Where now Nexus is the pure play for the data center, Catalyst is the pure play for the campus. The data center is enjoying growth, driven by 10 gig and all of the things going in terms of private and public cloud build-outs. And so you're seeing faster growth in the data center. But the enterprise network is also a very, very important area for our customers because go to those apps if you can't get to them.
Absolutely. When I think Catalyst, for better or for worse, I think of the 6500. I don't know what you have. Many sold. What is the lifespan now of the Catalyst 6500? Is that something on your side that will continue to evolve forever, as it were, whatever forever is?
Yeah, so one of the things people like about the Catalyst 6500 is investment protection. And the Catalyst 6500 you buy today, there's not a single screw or a single piece of sheet metal or a single piece of software, for that matter, that it matches what we first introduced a dozen years ago. But we are very focused on continuing to drive the Catalyst 6500 as the premier core enterprise networking platform. That's the platform that has all the service richness and all the capabilities that customers need. In fact, shortly, not yet, but shortly, we're going to be making a big announcement relative to the Catalyst 6500 roadmap. We want our technical strategy, we talked about this idea of one network, to be consistent. Whether it's wired or it's wireless, whether it's an access switch or a core switch, a consistent network platform. So that impacts both the software layers as well as the hardware and ASIC layers. So that unified access data plane ASIC we'll be using in all of our access devices. It has a sister chip, which is the Unified Services Control Plane ASIC, which we use for all of our service-rich processors, like the big routers. And together, that's the core of our ASIC family. We'll build all the products on top of it, even the 6500 over time.
Got it. And then just because I'm always curious about the 6500, because I see it everywhere I go. I bought one 10 years ago, whatever it might be. What has been your experience with your end users on how they migrate over time? Is it just the modularity, or do they at some point also replace chassis, or are there 12-year-old chassis in place with just new line cards?
Yeah, so when you get to the 10, 12-year-old chassis, that's when you start thinking about updating the chassis. So those line cards, 2 to 3 years, new services and capabilities are coming out. We're seeing people deploying line cards, deploying new supervisors, and then letting those chassis really run for quite some time. When we sell a 6500 today, we're selling that same investment protection guarantee as we sold 10 years ago. And so we expect clients to be running those boxes for 10 to 12 more years. Well, so we're fortunate in that of the top 3 to 5 most successful enterprise switches in history, they're all Cisco products. And the Cat 6500 is absolutely the switch that runs the world.
Yeah.
Every enterprise, every public sector, everybody has got the Cat 6500, the core of their networks, all the data going across that.
Good.
That's over $50 billion of switches sold to date, if I had my Big Mac sign up, and growing. Right, so 1PK is the software developer's kit to basically talk to iOS or an NXOS down at the network element layer. So what we're doing with 1PK is we're taking what was exposed in sort of a haphazard way with the CLI, and we're making that a consistent, standardized, programmatic interface. And that's a huge benefit because you can only deliver a limited amount of tooling on top of the CLI before it gets too unwieldy. 1PK opens up all that feature richness. At the same time, in addition to current capabilities, we're adding new capabilities, including the OpenFlow APIs, as well as new service control that we are developing under the 1PK platform.
Roadmap. I know some Cisco switches are OpenFlow enabled, some in the future. Is there a specific plan to have OpenFlow across the portfolio, or would you only see it fitting in certain niche segments?
Well, it's really in an early adopter phase right now, and the point we believe the strategy here is really around software-defined networks. Is the core of the strategy, and OpenFlow is one of many APIs that people will be using to talk to networking devices. So we released that in the 3850. We've got early adopters in the academic community using the Catalyst 3850 as an OpenFlow target. And they're working on the 1.3 integration with 1.3 and really running that in early adopter mode. So we'll have to see. The OpenFlow standard needs to evolve, become more feature rich and capable, and then we have to see how customers are deploying and using the product.
Sure. And then from the controller piece, because I know there's the Cisco One controller, and you guys are working in Open Daylight. How do you see that working in terms of the enterprise group and how you can actually sell a controller as part of a whole network architecture?
Well, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the benefits of today's network install base, right? Because the customers they have networks deployed. Nobody wants to rip that network out in order to deploy a new SDN network. So you work with that existing network. So the idea behind one controller is that you can use your existing network as is, and you can start to expose centralized capabilities via the one controller. Some of those could be read-only capabilities like discovery and topology. Some could be active management capabilities like quality of service or policy. Or you can bring the entire network under control of the one controller. And customers will have a chance to deploy incrementally and not have to have this big bang changeover.
Got it. Too, because I know there are plenty of Cisco-only shops, but there are also plenty heterogeneous shops. Do you think SDN is an enabler to help you enable heterogeneous environments where it's not Cisco-only?
Well, absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of getting standardized APIs like OpenFlow is that you can start to integrate third-party infrastructure into the network. And we're very much focused at Open Daylight as a way to not just drive accelerated development of the controller, which is good for everybody, but also drive a consistency in how controllers are built so that as an industry we can come together with an interoperable, heterogeneous solution for building networks using SDN.
And then in terms of networks, SDN-only networks, Intel folks, other folks are talking about reference designs just with merchant silicon and whatever, and commoditizing that entirely. Where's the additional differentiation and value that you have to compete against that, and do you need to, if at all?
Well, there's really two ends of the spectrum here. One end of the spectrum says, I'm going to completely commoditize the underlying infrastructure and I'm going to bring all control to the center. The other end of the spectrum is today's network, where everything is distributed. And really the question is, where are we going to end up? Are you going to see the pendulum swing from today's world all the way over to that fully centralized world? Or is there someplace in between that's a more rational end game for us? So what we believe is that you want to take forward all the benefits of the network you have today, the resiliency, the robustness, the scale, all those capabilities you have today, and then bring in centralized control over that existing network. So that's the end game that we think is most rational for customers.
What role does open source play in this? Is there a need to collaborate for not just standards, but open source hardware? Or and I know historically Cisco's contributed greatly to Linux. I know you guys contribute RDMA and all kinds of other fun stuff. But How does that all play in from your planning?
Right. Well, Open Daylight itself is not a standards org.
Right.
Open Daylight itself is an open source organization, so it's about bringing an open source community together. Here, this is really a vendor-driven open source community, but it's an open source community together so that we can ensure, as we build controllers, we can have commonality of IP and a technology and approach that we're going to end up with very robust controllers that are interoperable and able to develop heterogeneous networks, and that the industry evolves in a rational fashion. So that's a great example of how to use open process and open source really to build a new architecture for the industry. I think that one of the real challenges of being Cisco is that we need to both be extremely operationally efficient and drive a great experience for our existing customers, deliver all that investment protection and quality and the 10-year lifespan that they expect, while at the same time being very innovative and being able to push new applications and new technologies, whether it's SDN or IPv6 or the Internet of Everything, and be able to push those with the passion of a startup. So I spend a lot of my time making sure we can do both of those things well. And in fact,